So, the NBA officially released their 75 team. Basically, a huge panel of voters which included current and former players, journalists, coaches, and team executives. They voted on the NBA's 75 greatest players of all time to celebrate the 75th season of the NBA. This is actually a huge deal because we rarely ever see the NBA release their own official all-time player rankings. Usually we have to watch foolish YouTubers like myself make those lists. The last time the NBA did this was 25 years ago, in 1996, to celebrate their 50th season, where they created a list of the 50 greatest of all time. Now, in this new 75 list, every player from that original 50 list is still included, plus an additional 25 new players. Well, actually, it's 26 new players, since there was a tie in the voting. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and today I'm gonna talk about the biggest snubs and biggest surprises of this list. Which players got surprisingly left out, and which ones probably don't deserve to be there. Alright guys, prepare the popcorn. Let's get started. Snub, Dwight Howard. In my opinion, this is the biggest snub on the list, and the sad part is, I saw this coming. I knew that Dwight had a bad reputation among the voters, but there's no way he should have been left out. Here's the list of the 26 new players added on. I mean, a lot of these guys are so young. Dwight's had a better career than many of them. I'd say Dwight's career has been better than Carmelo Anthony's too. Dwight is an 8-time All-Star, 8-time All-NBA, 5-time All-Defense, and a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. Plus, he led the Magic on an improbable run to the finals and got a ring with the Lakers as a productive player off the bench. And even though he never won MVP, he finished top 5 in voting for 4 different seasons. Compare that to Melo, who came from the same era. He's a 10-time All-Star and 6-time All-NBA, and that's it. I guess he led the league in scoring once too, but Dwight led the league in rebounds for 5 seasons and blocks for 2 seasons. I'm not saying Melo doesn't deserve it, I'm just saying if he's there, then Dwight should definitely be there too. I think the voters knocked him down a few pegs for his longevity, as the last time he made an All-Star team was in 2014, at the age of 28. Afterwards, injuries and his refusal to accept a new role, those things hurt his image. Still, he did more in his first 10 years in the NBA than many of these guys did in their entire careers. Surprise, Damian Lillard. One thing to note is that of the 26 new players added, 11 of them are currently playing. Of those 11 players, I feel like Lillard is the most surprising choice here. If you look at his peers, other players around his age, they've all done something special. Steph Curry is the greatest shooter ever. Multiple titles, led the Warriors to 73 wins, yada yada. Russell Westbrook broke like all the triple-double records. James Harden, you might say they have comparable careers, but Harden is arguably a top 5 shooting guard of all time. I mean, personally, I don't think it's arguable. I think he certainly is. Anthony Davis and Kawhi Leonard are both decent choices too. They both won championships as a major piece on their respective teams. Kawhi's 2019 run in Toronto was legendary, and Davis has been the best or second best player at his position for so many years. Giannis is a once-in-a-generation athlete and also had a legendary finals run. While Lillard unquestionably has a great career from a pure numbers perspective, his resume does not stand out beyond that. Also, what makes his career better than somebody like Vince Carter, for example, who did not make the list? And that leads us to snub, Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady. Okay, bear with me here. For those of you who grew up watching the NBA in the 2000s, didn't we always think that Carter and T-Mac were better than Ray Allen and Paul Pierce? Or am I just not remembering it correctly? Yet Allen and Pierce made the list, but Carter and T-Mac did not. I think the voters put a lot of weight into championships, especially that 2008 Celtics team. Because prior to 2008, Carter, Allen, and Pierce were all on similar playing fields, while T-Mac was seen as a better individual player than all of them. It's reflected in his accolades too. McGrady has way more All-NBA selections than any of them. Of these 4 players, McGrady had the highest peak, but also the shortest career. Carter had the best longevity and a pretty long prime as well, yet the lack of titles hurt his resume. I understand why Allen and Pierce made the list. They have a combination of both longevity and championships. And I don't think they were surprising choices. It's just, I feel like Carter and T-Mac also deserved it. I guess there's not enough room. Surprise, Bob McAdoo. The thing that surprised me with McAdoo is that he's by far the oldest player that got added to this list. The dude got drafted in 1972, and I remember watching an episode of Open Court where the guys discussed players who got omitted from the 1996 list of the top 50. Almost all of them agreed that McAdoo got snubbed, so it was nice to see him added on this time. But the reason it surprised me was because I didn't think the NBA would go back that far to add him in. There's been a lot of favoritism towards newer players. There's been tons of superstars in the last 25 years, and I thought McAdoo would be forgotten. Thankfully, he isn't. He was one of the most influential big men in NBA history, a center with such a versatile skill set who played like a guard. If you watch his highlights from back then, he was a sight to see in the 1970s. Snub, Tony Parker. It's kinda sad that only one player of the Spurs dynasty in the 2000s made it on this list. Obviously, Tim Duncan made it, but neither Parker nor Ginobili did. I think Parker had a great case. If you're a 4-time champion, 4-time All-NBA, 6-time All-Star, and the starting point guard on a legendary Spurs dynasty, I feel like you should make the list. You add on his Finals MVP in 2007, where he absolutely shredded the Cavs. Parker has such a good case to make it. Unfortunately, I think his numbers held him back. He doesn't have the raw stats of somebody like Damian Lillard. Parker is a guy you had to watch to appreciate. His game was unique, completely different than any other point guards of his era. Up until today, he's still the only point guard in NBA history to lead the league in points in the paint for an entire season. That stat is still absurd to me. Surprise, Reggie Miller. Reggie is one of those guys who, if you watch any highlight reel from the 90s, you would think Miller was like a top 5 player in the league. Because you see him so often, he's had so many iconic playoff moments, and you can't help but think he's an all-time great. However, in reality, Reggie's only accolades include 5 All-Star selections and 3 All-NBA third-team selections. No championships. Granted, he did play in the same era and same conference as Michael Jordan, so we gotta cut him some slack. Reggie got in mostly for his memorable playoff performances, but also his longevity. He played 18 seasons and about 1,400 total NBA games. As a pure talent, his ceiling was never as high as other shooting guards I mentioned earlier, but his legacy was far greater. Not bad for a lanky guy out of UCLA. I'm happy he got voted in, but still I was surprised too, due to his lack of awards. I guess this further shows how much more weight is put on longevity. Snub, Pau Gasol. I made a video about the Gasol brothers recently, so if you want to hear me talk more about them, you can watch that video. In 18 seasons, Pau accomplished so much. When he first came in, he brought a totally different look for a power forward. Pau had the aggression and post-up skills of a typical big man, but he also brought a level of finesse, a soft touch, and incredible court vision that was unheard of at his position. He carried the Grizzlies to their first ever playoff appearances and eventually became a critical piece to the Lakers' championship runs. Plus, his longevity is severely underrated. Even up until his mid-30s, he was still producing, still making All-Star teams. Pau concluded his career as a 6-time All-Star, 4-time All-NBA, and 2-time champion. Although, I'm not sure if this NBA Top 75 list includes international accolades too. Pau certainly would benefit from that. And back in his prime, he was a top 5 power forward, and for a short period between 2008 to 2010, he might have been the best power forward, a criminally underrated player. And let's take a look at another snub, Joe Dumars. Probably the most underrated player of all time. People forget that Dumars actually won the Finals MVP in 1989. He led the Pistons to their first ever championship. Known by Michael Jordan as the toughest defender he ever went up against, Dumars was a powerhouse on the perimeter. Despite being an undersized shooting guard, he held his ground to the tune of 5 All-Defensive nominations. Even in his playing days, he never got enough credit. Another snub I should mention is Alex English. In the 1980s, an era dominated by Magic and Bird, it was English who scored the most points of that decade. Of course, that was mostly because the Nuggets were playing at a breakneck pace, the fastest team in the league, which greatly suited his playstyle. English was a natural scorer, a small forward who was ridiculously efficient for that era. It led to 8 All-Star selections, and he led the Nuggets to many deep playoff runs. Before we finish this video, I also wanted to list a few players who will most likely be on the next list when they do like a top 100 list to celebrate the NBA's 100th season. Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, Joel Embiid, Trae Young, Jason Tatum, and probably Zion Williamson if they keep building their careers. They'll certainly be on the next list. Some people were angry that some of these young guys were not on there, even if they already deserve it. But I think it's fair. Remember back in 1996, Shaq was only in the league for 3 years, yet he still got voted in. That was so controversial back then, since he was so young, and he made the list over established guys like Dominique Wilkins, who thankfully made it this time. Anyway, that's all folks. In my opinion, those were the biggest snubs and biggest surprises from the NBA's top 75. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Do you agree or disagree with me? What other players surprised you, and which others do you think got snubbed? Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.